Hi, 3%. My name's Paul Fung.
I'm Linda Kim.
I'm Romeo Service.
And thank you so much for joining us for this talk.
In different Asian cultures, there's a saying that goes, the nail that sticks out gets hammered down. Our parents and grandparents came from this school of thought which valued conformity, stability, and obedience. But for Asians who grew up in North America and Western ideals of individuality, reconciling these two worlds can seem like an impossible task.
Sometimes we don't feel American enough, and on the flip side, sometimes we don't feel Asian enough either. As members of the AAPI community, we have our own unique culture and heritage, and we have multiple identities growing up here in North America. So the question begs, how can we begin to bring our true, authentic selves to the workplace when sometimes we struggle to know exactly who that is? Put another way, can the Western business model readily accept us for who we truly are? Is being our authentic selves good enough?
The answer to that question is there really is no answer yet. And the reason why we talk about this is so we can continue to work on it and do the work that needs to get done. So I'm a VP creative director at RPA, and I also belong to the Filipino American community. And growing up a second generation Filipino American, I learned from two very different schools of thought. So on one hand, my parents taught me all the different aspects that make them Filipino and make them proud. One of which was to always show love, to always show respect and hospitality to others, and cater to everybody else before catering to yourself. The other thing that they really showed me was how to be resilient. And even if the odds are stacked against you, if you work harder than everybody else, eventually that hard work will get rewarded. Now on the other side of the coin, I have my American roots, and that showed me everything from individualism, independence, being unapologetically opinionated, and frankly not really taking shit from anyone. And it showed me my rebellious side and how there are rules, but those rules can be bent. And both those worlds really shaped who I was as a person. But what I think we've all noticed is that when we get into work, one side of that coin gets valued way more than the other, especially when you start rising to the top in business. So what I would love to see is for us to really start to feel like we can express both sides of who we are from being American and being Asian. And my hope is that both these worlds can converge, and all these aspects of what makes us who we are what makes us great leaders and are valued in the workplace. I mean, Paul, I know that you have passion from your own upbringing as to how to be authentic and to help lift other people up in the Asian community.
No, absolutely. So like I said earlier, my name's Paul. I'm actually a Chinese Canadian. My parents immigrated from Hong Kong to Canada when they were very, very young. And that experience from them kind of informed who I am today. So when they came over as, visible immigrants, their whole ethos was to sort of fly under the radar. They did not want to rock the boat. They did not want to draw attention to themselves. They taught me never to brag. They looked at it as sort of like, that's egotistical. They always deflected praise. And that's something that I still do, to this day. So, it's hard for me to take compliments, but in corporate America, you really have to take those accomplishments and leverage them to advance. Otherwise, you're just simply shortchanging yourself. While our parents encouraged assimilation, I think now we are at a place and time in our careers and in our lives where we can actually encourage affirmation of who we are. For the longest time, I know for myself, I tried to emulate white leaders to very limited success, let's say that. But there was just something that didn't feel very authentic about it. And so now I'm in a place where I'm just going to lean in to my upbringing, who I am, and just affirm the values and the foundation that I was raised with. Not everyone talks about their accomplishments or performances in the same way. And we have to be more sensitive culturally when it comes to coaching and managing. My personal mission is to start tackling these stereotypes that, Asians lack leadership qualities. It's we're not seen as assertive, we're seen as docile, or perhaps even unfit for corporate executive positions. So I'm constantly pushing this idea that we need to unlearn these biases on both sides. I need to unlearn, certain things that I grew up with and the business world needs to unlearn some of their biases towards Asians.
Thanks for sharing, Paul. That really resonates with me because I agree some of our characteristics, they shouldn't be seen as a weakness because leaders don't look like one way and they don't act like one way. I am Korean American. My parents immigrated from South Korea. I was born in New Jersey and was the first person to be born in the United States from both sides of the family. And my parents taught me to work hard, not for anyone else but yourself. And they emphasized that the hard work would speak for itself. Though the two cultures are very different, there are some universal norms that are shared between all cultures when trying to raise a good family. My parents taught me to be respectful, to be a good listener, to always be polite and kind to others. And I think a lot about what it was like for my parents to immigrate to a country where they couldn't speak the language. They probably struggled on how best to raise us in a culture they didn't understand or know. And in the end, they leaned on their ideas, what made a person solid, what made a family respectable. And I didn't realize it then, and I took it for granted, but my parents were also growing up in the United States while they were raising me and my sister. Whether you are born here or abroad, we had to exist in two different worlds simultaneously. And while this presented challenges, it's really helped me and it's been a blessing because it gave me lifelong training to be able to connect different voices, ideas, norms, and excel despite challenges thrown in my way. In an ever increasingly diverse workplace, this has and always will be an important skill for any employee and company to perform optimally. So how do we gain our share of voice?
I kind of want to unpack a little bit more about the way we were raised, because I think that personally has a lot to do with how that informs and shapes the way we think and the way we see the world.
It's like when I was a kid, I only had blonde hair, blue-eyed Barbie dolls because that's all that was available.
Right.
Or, I'd watch TV shows and there were no characters that looked like me. Or, my lunches, they were very different. They were like mini rice balls or...
I was raised eating shrimp chips. A lot of people probably don't know what that is, but it's something that I've loved growing up, but I just can't show that self. When I go into work, I put on this mask of who I think people want to perceive me to be. A lot of times that's the American values that I've learned. And a lot of the things that I've learned about, being a Filipino American have sort of been put in my back pocket until I go home.
My parents think in very binary terms, like right or wrong.
Yeah.
Like there's no shades of gray. And that also, I think, contributes to this fear of, failure. Mm-hmm. Because, in school, like there was no room for failure, like at all. It's like either you got A's or that was it.
Yeah.
I'm also just trying to in my journey, trying to unlearn that and also realizing, oh yeah, there are multiple shades of gray and there is no one standard of success. And so we need to figure out and decide for ourselves, what is that? What does that look like?
It's funny that you say that because if you go to any business seminar and even when we are trained as advertising professionals, right? It's one of the main things that you hear all the time is, one of my best learning experiences was failure, right?
Mm-hmm.
You're going to fail, you're going to fail, you're going to fail. You just have to accept that you're going to fail. And for us, and I'm sure a lot of other Asians out there, yeah, that's how we were raised. It's you fail, you are a failure, right? So then we come in here and it's we have this very guarded way of approaching our work and approaching other people and approaching how we want to view ourselves in leadership because we're I can't do this wrong. If I do this wrong, I'm gonna get in trouble for it. I'm gonna get something bad is gonna happen to me.
Yeah. We were trained to never fail.
Yeah.
Failure is shame. Can never have that.
Yeah.
And that in itself, just curbs risk taking in many ways. And so maybe that's why there's this perception that we are sort of meeker, a little bit more on the conservative side. We're not as willing to take bigger risks. Mm-hmm. And then maybe that's where that comes from.
Yeah, it's definitely different. When I tell my two daughters, I tell them, be brave. It's okay to
right.
fail. And it's different than what we were taught and raised with. Mm-hmm. But that was also, again, due to how our parents wanted us to assimilate and not make waves and, just kind of blend in.
There's so many times when we are asking to be accepted, like throughout our whole lives. It's like, please accept me, please let me into this group. But I think nowadays, at least we have the privilege of like being at a particular level at a particular age where, we can just kind of go in and be like, this is who I am.
Yeah.
This is who we are. So whether you like it or not, this is what I'm going to be doing and this is how I'm going to act. Leaning into our otherness and what makes us unique and different is going to be a strength. It's like it's no longer about conformity. Like it used to be about us, like A, conforming to our Asianness, and then also B, conforming to our workplace. But I think now is an opportunity for us to sort of stand out, stand up, and just be very proud of our background and upbringing, as unique as it is.
Agreed. By the way, those shrimp chips are so good.
They're super good.
They're the best.
They're the best.
I mean, we are essentially the first of our kind, right? We don't have generations before us that have been in this business before that can vouch for us, right? We're sort of setting the tone, and it's important that, if we have a voice to be able to use it, even if we feel like we were trained a different sort of way to sort of fly under the radar.
Yeah. And I think it's also up to us to be able to create a safe environment so that our teams can feel comfortable just being who they are,
Totally.
and without having to wear the mask that you were referring to.
From whatever background they come
exactly.
from.
Be who you are at the end of the day. It's so much harder to wear a mask. It's really exhausting mentally, emotionally, and physically.
And to your point, like a rising tide helps lift all boats. And so if we can come together as a community, as an Asian community, hopefully we create more visibility for ourselves and that we can help lift not just ourselves, but like the next generation up.
Honestly, seeing, you both being creative directors, it's like the next wave of art directors and copywriters, when they come in and they see someone that looks like them in the room, they'll be so much more comfortable being able to present an idea that maybe you wouldn't or haven't felt comfortable being able to do before, So you're paving a way for them.
I think also part of that is just like breaking stereotypes in general. Like when you're casting like an Asian person, like why can't we cast like an Asian man as like the heroic or romantic lead? Why can't this little girl like be anything but like a super hard working nerd? Like she could be like super athletic. She could do so many things. I think it's up to us, as creators to kind of look at the stereotypes that have existed for our people and break those, and just push forward like our stories. Like, we're not stereotypes. Let's kind of like show like the diversity within, like our community. I think it really is about redefining what the idea of a leader is, what that leader looks like, who that leader could be, and just like expanding that to be much more inclusive of different styles. The numbers don't lie. There's like a very imbalanced ratio when it comes to representation within the workforce, but then representation in the executive level.
We've talked about the culture that shaped us. Now let's talk about action items moving forward. But first, let's start with some numbers. Asians are the fastest growing racial group in the country. The Asian population in the US nearly doubled between 2000 and 2019, and is projected to surpass 46 million by 2060. And Asian Americans represent 27% of professionals, but only half of that is among executives. And then when we get to the C-suite, that number is even lower, at 5.6%. So the question is, why? How can we gain our share of voice in a predominantly white workplace?
Shifting towards true meritocracy should be our goal. Asians represent almost half of the world's population, and companies should not try to hit some superficial number, but they should really truly invest time and look into their current staff and potential candidates. We should have more culturally relevant leadership and management training, as there is an innate cultural understanding of office and industry dynamics that people need help oftentimes to navigate. The current system often rewards long-standing relationships and connections, which can make it really hard for well-qualified candidates who are on the outside to advance. The current system wasn't designed with everyone's success in mind. So please don't be a passive bystander. Don't be discouraged, because you can create your own future. It certainly helps when people can also be our allies and our supporters. So for hiring managers, I always appreciate and have appreciated the focus on DEI initiatives. But don't forget to monitor the rate of retention and promotion for all qualified candidates. And it also shouldn't be just about numbers or quotas for managers. It should be about true understanding and fostering a sense of belonging. Remember, Asian Americans are well represented in the workforce, yet woefully underrepresented in the corridors of corporate power and key decision making. Have awareness of what is, happening in the world and how it's affecting people internally. Be a true mentor and ally with your actions, not just your words, because not all voices are being represented in key organizational decisions. And at the end of the day, the power of mutual compassion is a key driver in making real change. So for our creative and production partners, there is a need for inclusive marketing because it creates important visibility and equity.
So the more that we begin to show our unique culture in our workspace and advertising, not just during Lunar New Year and during things like AAPI month, but anytime, there's a wealth of stories that are out there that are unseen by the mainstream. Remember, Asian culture is American culture. We need to embrace the things that we've shied away from showing to others about our Asian identity and what makes us who we are. And as advertisers, this is a chance for Asian American representation and storytelling in everyday content. We also need to have an understanding of the path that it took to get to the top for us, and that it's a much different journey than it is for our counterparts. Seeing people like us in leadership positions is inspiring and powerful. And as businesses, you have the awesome power to help guide AAPI employees to the top and design programs made to build equity for Asian leaders in the workforce. Lastly, businesses need to continue their efforts for standard inclusivity and unconscious bias training for their C-suite. Also, there will be more equity for Asian employees, and we'll have a sense of feeling heard if C-suite leaders take ownership and pride in Asian-led initiatives.
As we know, marginalized communities have a greater distance to travel to get to the top. Think about representation from the get-go. Leaders need to broaden their criteria for what success looks like, and we need to understand that the next generation of leaders may not look or act the way that you might expect. So this is my message to other fellow Asian Americans. Know what you want and ask for it. Be visible. Understand that you are not alone. You are part of a community. You have value. Don't let others invalidate your approach or your experiences. Thank you so much for joining us. I learned a lot from talking to both of you, got to know you a little bit better, and hopefully you all got to understand a little bit of where we're coming from. And with that, we'll say goodbye.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Hi, everyone. We want to thank the 3% Conference for having both of us as part of this year's event to talk about visibility for the invisible minority. I'm Jessalyn Lamb, VP of Member Development and Diversity at the Interactive Advertising Bureau, also known as IAB.
And hi, I am Bernice Chow, VP of Brand Creative at FIGS, and we are the founders of Asians in Advertising. While we both grew up on opposite coasts, Jessalyn on the east and me on the west, we realized that we had so many similarities being Asian, both in our careers and in our lives.
A little background about our Asian heritage. I'm a Chinese American born in Poughkeepsie, New York, in the Hudson Valley. I grew up surrounded by predominantly white people, and it wasn't until I moved to New York City to go to Baruch College that I was surrounded by so many different cultures. It was an eye-opening experience to open my horizons to not be the only Asian student.
And here I am with my fun perm, a Taiwanese American, second generation, born in Cupertino, California. I grew up in the heart of Silicon Valley, where Asians are predominant, and never really thought about my race and how it made me different from other Americans. That is until I entered the advertising field in a predominantly white environment, and even more so lately in light of the prevailing Asian hate. Today, we will be explaining how the Asian population within this country has been invisible, what it means to be a model minority, and why that term actually is hurtful. We will be sharing resources and actionable ways on how AAPI can advocate for themselves and how others can be an ally. and how companies can take an active role to support Asians.
And Asians are the fastest growing racial group in the country. The US Asian population is projected to reach 46 million by 2060 and is now a record high of 23 million Asian Americans. With this many people, why are Asians still invisible? Asians are invisible from the term model minority, that we are expected to do what we do well, but not so well that we stand out. The challenges and discrimination that confront Asians remain unnoticed, which is why we're advocating for visibility for the invisible minority. Here's a snapshot from the US Census for a breakdown of the US Asian population to remind everyone that we are not a monolith. Let's start with defining what it means to be a model minority. It refers to a minority group perceived as particularly successful compared to other minority groups, and that's holding Asians to a higher standard of success across academic, economic, and cultural domains.
This myth does more harm than good, because when you encompass Asians as one big bucket, you're discounting that we come from 48 different countries, over 30% of the Earth's landmass, each country with a different in governments, history, culture, and socioeconomic class, in which lots of Asians have entered America as refugees or in actually need of assistance. While Asian Americans may have the highest median income of any racial group, they also have the largest income gap of any, by over 10 times, leaving disadvantaged Asians without any assistance. Many are very surprised when I tell them that in New York City, Asians are actually the highest in terms of poverty, a staggering 26.6%.
This model minority myth hurts Asians in the workplace because we will get hired for the entry-level opportunities, but then we aren't being promoted. I've had this from personal experience where I've had bosses tell me they hired me because Asians are smart, and yet I never got promoted in those jobs. This is also known as the bamboo ceiling, a term coined by Jane Hoon, author of Breaking the Bamboo Ceiling, where she addresses barriers many Asian Americans face in the workplace when it comes to upward mobility. According to the Harvard Business Review, Asian Americans are the least likely group to be promoted to managers in America. Asians tend to become the dependable person on the team, expected to do the bulk of the grunt work without complaints, because they were taught to put their head down and work hard to succeed, but unfortunately, that does not work in our industry.
So today here, we want to talk about some ways that you can advocate for yourself. First, self-promotion. Culturally, we are not experienced in bragging about ourselves, but we are in the industry of advertising. So it's definitely important to brand yourself and make your presence known. So get good at your humble brags, talk about your accomplishments and what you're most passionate about, and how that can relate to you being the ultimate catch. Get comfortable with talking about yourself, creating that elevator pitch, and add that to your website and your LinkedIn. 2, ask for it. Don't wait for your employer to give you a shot at that brief or opportunities to present to the client, that promotion, that salary bump, etc. You can ask for these things outside of your review. Make an actionable plan with your employer as to how these things you want can be accomplished. 3, it's okay to leave. If your employer is not recognizing you or giving you the opportunities you deserve, it could be time to leave. Culturally, it's so innate for us to just be grateful for what's given to us. It feels hard to leave even if your relationship with your employer is not mutual. You're not alone in the feeling of non-employer recognition. In our leadership panel that we had, we heard from many C-suite panelists, many times where they felt the same way. I recommend you joining Coffee, an amazing fake company on LinkedIn to help getting people of color visibility on LinkedIn. Or build your network. When you don't work with people who look like you, it's hard to see who you can become. So whether that's reaching out to those in your company, going to networking events, or like me, you can reach out to people you've admired from afar on LinkedIn and have virtual coffee. Like Bonnie Wan says, build your network of friendtors, meaning someone you may or may not work with, but also someone that can help and guide you in your career. You can always join Asians in Advertising, where we have networking component to all our events. Lastly, here's our bonus advice: pay it forward. Being that there are so few Asian leaders in the industry, it's important to get your voice out. Whether it's sharing your experiences, speaking on a panel, or mentoring, we need to be heard. There's a massive shortage of minority mentors. So be the person you needed when you were young by reaching out, being open about your experiences in the industry, and lifting up the next generation.
Now we'll move on to how to be a better ally. The first one is speak out and check in. This means to speak up for others when you see something to truly become an ally. For example, you could report hate incidents at stopaapi.hate.org. The number of hate incidents reported to Stop AAPI Hate increased over 70% from March 2020 to March 2021. In addition to speaking out, make sure to check in with your AAPI family, friends, or colleagues. A simple, hi, I'm checking in and letting you know I see what's happening to the AAPI community. It's not okay. Let me know if you'd like to chat. Will be a great way as a starting point to check in with them. Number 2, educate yourself. It's important to be a student of life and take the time to educate yourself. There are so many free resources currently available. For example, Asian Americans Advancing Justice have been offering complimentary allyship and bystander training to stop anti-Asian American harassment. You could also educate yourself on the history of Asian Americans, such as the PBS 5-part Asian American docuseries. Number 3, support and donate to AAPI organizations. Whether it's donating to Asian nonprofits or supporting Asian-owned organizations, these are some examples of being more intentional on how you could help the AAPI community. Number 4, follow AAPI leaders and publications. Evaluate the people and publications you're currently following. Make sure you're following AAPI leaders to be in the know of what's happening in the community. Moving on to how companies can get involved to take a more active role. Number 1, do not be silent. Silence can be dangerous, and you want to make sure you are acknowledging what is going on, whether that's communicating in your company town hall or sending out an email to your employees to let them know that you're there for them and you're happy to support them. Number 2, offer resources to educate your organization. Educate them by sharing actionable resources people could do in order to show that you really care. Number 3, create sustainable solutions. Make sure you're supporting your AAPI employees beyond AAPI Heritage Month. For example, you could create mentorship programs or professional development that includes them for their career growth. Number 4, amplify Asian voices to be heard. This is an opportunity for leaders to step up and shine a light on your Asian employees for their voices to be heard. Be empathetic to ask them if they feel comfortable sharing their experience and listen to what they're sharing with you instead of wanting to respond with your own story. And the last one here is leveraging employee resource groups. You do not want your Asian employees to feel a lack of belonging or access to opportunity in the workplace. This is why we encourage you to leverage or create an employee resource group for them to have a community.
Thank you so much for joining our panel today. It was so wonderful meeting everyone, and we hope you enjoyed it. Feel free to reach out to both of us on LinkedIn. If you would like to learn more about our organization, visit asiansinadvertising.com, where we have plenty of resources, as well as a link to our recently launched podcast. We look forward to connecting with you. Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.